I'm seeing the two photos at the end of the question mark, post your questions here, of the two dogs that I referenced before. So going back to the leash pressure responsiveness. And I just want to say that it doesn't matter what you're doing and what you're not doing with your dog. I have learned so much about my dogs doing practically nothing for the last 8 months, because first assessing, like, what is wrong with Dakota? I can't quite put my finger on it. Nobody's noticing except for me. And then realizing, oh, it's doing a little funny thing, rapping one direction. Then waiting for specialists, and then assessing, getting mixed messages about what's wrong with him, and then being on leash walks and watching and videoing, blah, 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 blah. But it led to so many insights that I would say I've learned as much about Dakota in the last 8 months as I've learned about him in 8 months of doing agility, of 8 months of doing search and rescue, of anything. It is no different in terms of that the dog is expressing their truth, right? They're expressing what is true for them. That's all they're ever doing. And so with this leash responsiveness, because he needed to walk slowly on leash, for months, I could have either just gone, oh my God, this is so boring, and, put like the kind of harness on him that would keep him from pulling, and, drudgily gone through the whole thing. But I guess I love training. I love, asking questions like, why is my well-trained dog unwilling to walk on a loose leash? And yes, there are reasons. Border Collies aren't bred to do that. He has never been a dog to walk. Like, Lilith is not a dog to walk. Most dogs trot. I think it's the most efficient way for them to move. And especially if a dog has a sore leg, maybe just rear legs, but I'm guessing all legs, that there's some advantages to trotting, that it's a shortened stride, that a sore rear leg, I think this is more relevant to the rear leg, is going to go through less range of motion trotting than it will walking in a long, lumbering kind of way. So I think he was avoiding walking because it was uncomfortable. That left leg didn't want to extend all the way back. But he also had no experience. And if you watch your dog walking slowly in front of you, if you've never done walk training, which is what I'm going to call what I've been doing for months and months and months, that you will see asymmetry. I've never seen a dog that hasn't been trained to walk, like now Dakota has been trained to walk. I've never seen him walk with perfect symmetry. They look a little bit just not fluid. And in contrast, now that he's learned how to walk through training, he has the most beautiful fluid walk that, and he is willing to do it for miles on end because it's comfortable. First, because his legs are feeling much better, but second, because he's had a lot of practice at doing it. And so with the leash responsiveness, I'm going to explain the physical training part, but I want to really emphasize the mental and emotional shift part of it, because this is the key to having a dog like Dakota, like a dog that's bred to, trot and to think and to be high energy, to get them to walk slowly without suppression. So I don't want him to be suppressed and obedient. I want him to find a way of being that this is a moderately enjoyable, or at least not aversive thing to do. And what I realized for him is I needed to slow down myself to what I'll call a walking meditation pace. And the way I learned walking meditation, it's not like you're walking like you're on, antipsychotic meds. It's not that slow. That it is like walking intentionally. So it's like footstep, 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 footstep. So it's not like foot, the way I walk naturally, which is, that way. And it's not just so slow that you're barely inching along. But by shifting my speed into what I'll call the walking meditation mindset for me, seemed to cause him to shift into a walking meditation mindset for him. So like when I shifted my energy from we are going for a walk, so that's forward thinking, right? Just like a dog breaks from a start line, breaks from the contacts, takes it off course obstacle. they're thinking ahead. They're not in the present moment, like, responding to cues, aware of the handler while focusing on the obstacles. But it shifted my focus to the here and now, which shifted his focus to the here and now. And what I noticed is he learned how to be in this lower arousal state in a present kind of way. So he was still experiencing the walk. His nose was active. His eyes were active. So he wasn't like shut down, and he wasn't being an obedient healer. He was experiencing the walk, but in a present, connected way. So this was the key to getting sustained loose leash walking. And I'm going to venture to say that if a person is not committed to taking the time to go for these kind of walks in a meditative mindset and pace, that you're probably not going to get sustained loose leash walking from a high energy sports dog. So it's not for everyone. I am thrilled to death that I trained it, and I never would have even thought about this had I not needed to do something during these months of rest. But I'm so glad I did because of everything I learned, and now I know exactly what it takes to learn this. For a dog like Dakota or Lil, not that I asked her to walk, she's trotting while she's prancing along, but it is not to be taken lightly. I consider this to be like training a running dog walk, that level of commitment. You have to have a reason for wanting to do it that's going to keep you motivated to do it for as long as it takes to give your dog time to understand what you're asking, and to train your dog to be able to work in a lower state of arousal and yet to still be kind of in a working, and what I mean by working, it's more like a focused mindset, that the dog learns to, take in the world and to stay connected to the handler at the same time through a loose leash. And the loose leash is communication. That the way I left these lessons in our ocean version of the channel healing course. They're still in there. That the rhythm of a loose leash, gently touching the back of your knees and gently touching the shoulder of the dog, your brain ceases to acknowledge that because it's ongoing pattern. So just like you're not aware that you're wearing socks once you put them on your feet and they're in your shoes, but you are aware when you put them on or take them off. So you're noticing the change in things. So anyway, so that gentle touching of the leash to the dog's shoulder and to the back of your legs, it's just not in your consciousness until something starts changing. So if the dog starts revving up a little bit, your brain's going to immediately go back online and notice, oh, the pressure behind my knee has now just increased. And the dog is going to feel that same subtle increase because their brain's going to go back online about it. And so the dog then can respond to that shift by coming back down. I hope this makes sense. So instead of like the dog going to the end of the leash and that being the trigger for this dog is no longer connected to the handler, or vice versa, like the team is no longer connected, you're getting it in the earliest stage where the dog is thinking about forward thinking, hasn't actually fully taken action yet. So it's the same thing that I've been talking about with the context. See how this is all the same thing, whether you're training agility or training loose leash walking. You are able to then give the dog a verbal marker that says, hey, I just noticed that you are starting to shift your thinking into forward thinking versus being in the present meditative moment with me. And I believe that is an important element, a subtle element. And it does keep this more interesting for the handler and the dog because neither of you is thinking about the leash, that you are both free to enjoy the moment because your brain, again, has just like disregarded the rhythm of this loose leash banging. And so it gives you both a lot of freedom to enjoy your walk without the whole walk being about loose leash walking, what's my dog doing, and paying attention. You can actually both be paying attention to the world around you while being connected. So that is the element of once this behavior gets taken on the road or even in your house, which is where you should start, right? Low distraction environment. But the responding to leash pressure, here's the other thing that I realized was missing for Dakota. And the connection for me came from when I was preparing him to be easier to handle at the vet, that he became so nervous and so stressed out. Where I did that pressure, I'd put a gentle pressure on his shoulder. If he wouldn't yield, I'd press a little harder, and then I'd release. Nothing would happen. Press, and eventually he started, the muscles would just soften a little bit under my palm, and as soon as they softened, I'd release the pressure, tell him good boy, and I'd give him a treat. And he quickly learned, once he started offering that gentle yielding or relaxation of the muscles under my palm, he learned that when I touch him is to shift away from that versus to press back. And the releasing leash pressure is the same exact concept. And he didn't know this. So the first time I put a slip lead around him, or maybe it was his collar, I don't remember, and I pulled sideways, creating pressure on that leash in the house. And I remember him looking at me going, what? Like, he didn't know what this meant. And so he's just standing strong, and I'm holding that leash, and it was probably, I don't know, 5 seconds, and then the ever so slight releasing, a smidgy of pressure by his feet didn't move, but just something softened in his neck, or his neck moved ever so slightly, not to the point where I could see it, but I could feel it in my hand. And as soon as he did that slight release, I released all the pressure. Good boy, gave him a treat. The easiest way to feel the subtlety, and I'm talking feather touch, that is the level of subtlety that is the first step of this, because that is what the dog is learning, is to notice the subtle change in leash pressure and to soften against it versus to press up against it. So the easiest way to do this is to have your arm clamped to your side, and so that your hand isn't moving. And on a side note, because I don't want to forget to say this, the way we are training our dogs to pull on the leash is if we have our hands loose and our hands are low and kind of in front of us and we're holding the leash and the dog pulls, what happens? Your arm goes forward. And when your arm goes, basically what you're teaching the dog is feeling that the pressure is gently increasing, right? As that leash gets more straight versus loop, that is a subtle change in pressure the dog is feeling. And then what happens next? Release of pressure as our arm comes up. So one really important element of this leash walking when you're working with your dog at first, and I don't have to do it with Dakota anymore, is that you have to have your hand clamped to your side so that you are not shifting, you are not doing anything at all to the leash. That the leash is banging against the back of your legs again to start. Now I have the leash in front of me, and it's he's now doing it. But for a few weeks, it was behind my legs, and my hand offside hand was clamped against my hip so that I made sure I wasn't releasing any pressure that he was putting on. So that's a really important thing. So back to this subtle feather touch thing, that I did that with him, I don't know, maybe 3 times, like really short sessions in one day. And by the 3rd session, he was already going, oh, I get this. And so a little bit of pressure, and he'd physically move his feet towards it. So I was moving to the left, to the right, towards me. I even moved him away from me, and yet I'm not sure that is relevant. I think it was fine to train, but there's never a point where I'm going to be doing that to my dog. That's a little side note. So once the dog now understands this behavior, that when they feel the leash pressure to release into it, just like the shoulder pressure for the handling thing, and I guess like the collar touching would also be something similar to the dog, although that's the opposite. Dog's pushing in. Cancel that thought. So before you do any leash walking, you do the warm-up with that, clamp your hand to your side, gently put on a smidgy of pressure on the leash, and see if your dog instantly releases that pressure. If they don't, then you just keep warming it up, going, well, clearly I'm not going to go add motion to this if my dog can't do it in a stationary position. And once they're doing it well in a stationary position, do some leash walking, with the leash behind you, in your house, like walking towards the door where they know they're going for a walk. That they may drive ahead of you, and then you can stop and see, do they instantly respond to that leash pressure? If not, you've got to warm more up with the stationary position. The other advantage of adding the collar and leash in your house is the dog is eventually going to figure out pretty quickly that having a leash on doesn't mean we're going for a walk, and now you've kind of de-intensified the leash, right? That your dog isn't going to shift their mindset as a result of having the leash on. So again, there's all this amazing internal, mental, emotional stuff taking place with this simple training of teaching a dog to respond to leash pressure. And so once your dog is doing it in the house and has stopped associating the leash with high energy pulling and all that, then you can go in your backyard, do the same thing. Again, starting with stationary leash position inside, going out, stationary leash position, resistance training, all that stuff. It's a way to see, does my dog understand this in this context? And once your dog understands it there, now you can do some in the house, then go out in your yard a little bit, then maybe go down to the end of your driveway. And anytime your dog isn't responding to the leash pressure while moving, you just stop and you do the little warm up in stationary position, and you make a note to yourself, my dog couldn't do it in the driveway, could do it in the backyard. And you basically are doing these mini training sessions. And I definitely recommend going on the same route when you're doing this early training, so that you know where the trigger points are, you know where the squirrel in the tree is, you know where the dog behind the fence is, all that stuff. And once you've got your out and back or little loop, once your dog is consistently responding to leash pressure, and I'm not talking perfection, that dogs are still dogs and there's going to be stuff that catches them by surprise. But not like that. It's not a fight or a conflict between the dog and the handler. That's what I'm saying, is there can be some imperfections, but all in all, there's a connection. There's kind of a, I guess that's the best way of saying it. There's a connection that you're both experiencing the world while also staying connected. And after doing, being successful on the same route over and over and over for like maybe a week or two, then experiment with different routes, and there will be kind of a fall off of that behavior. And again, you just stop anytime the dog stops responding, and you warm them up with the stationary. To a passerby, it's going to be unclear of anything that's happening, because it's going to be the subtle featherweight response that your hand grip to your side is going to be. So I assume you're all getting the point of, like, you have to really have a reason to want to train this, right? That this is not some light thing to train. But I have to say, to have a dog that when I moved here, it took me a year to be able to walk him on the street out my front door, because he was so over aroused by the moving cars and bikes and runners and everything. It's like a kind of urban, population in what looks like a suburban area, but it is definitely heavily populated. That to go from that to being able to walk now anywhere, where he has now generalized this behavior to, he can walk in a flat collar, he can walk in a slip lead, he can walk in a harness with a clip on the back, that it really surprised me that once he understood this, that all of a sudden we could take this show on the road, and he can now do it anywhere. And so there's the learning of the releasing of pressure, the ability to stay in a low arousal state that I have never worked him in a low arousal state like this, to be able to maintain this in a way that, and it's not joy. Like, if you look at him, you're like, oh, he doesn't look joyful, but either do I when I'm walking in that meditative state, that it is just a calmer taking in the world. And it's not it is kind of a positive when you're very present, but it's not like Yahoo the way our sports dogs are when we're usually training. So you are training your dog to work in a low arousal state, which I'll bet you is going to have some effects on his ability to settle around agility. Not that that's been a huge issue, but it'll be interesting to see about that. So there's the mental, emotional shift, and he has learned to walk in a way that is very comfortable and looks very natural. That prior, it was a very kind of, it just wasn't fluid. And it is a beautiful thing to see him moving the way he's moving. So partially because he's feeling so good, but partially because I think he learned how to walk efficiently and he's willing to do it. So it's been a really, really great experience. And, looking back, I don't think I'd change this last 8 months for anything. It's been amazing. And, I encourage anybody who has a dog, an older dog or a dog that for any reason that you've stopped working because of whatever issue, is to consider training something new. Not for the sake of training it and getting anything done, but for the experience of getting to know that dog at a deeper level. It has shifted and deepened my connection with Dakota, and that was a really deep connection to start. It's just something is different now. I just can't explain it other than it's like magnificent, the experience I have connecting with him at this new level, this lower arousal level. It's really, really, really deep. So that's it